Andrew. So one of the things that amazes me about many of our presenters is that they are serious decathletes. For example, not only is our kickoff presenter a photographer, but he can lift other people's pet pigs, make a mean mac and cheese and the best flourless chocolate cake in the world, teach sailing, run a sub 4-hour marathon, and tell a really, really, really funny penguin joke. Very curious. Both his fiance and friend mentioned something about the Yankees, but I couldn't understand what they were saying, so it's for their own good anyway. Tonight, he will talk about one of his strongest pursuits, making and drinking the perfect old-fashioned. I like him already. Especially if he gives us a drink. The bar where he mastered his old-fashioned recipe is also where he met and proposed to his fiancée, Brianna, who happens to be another presenter tonight. Totally by accident. We didn't know, they didn't mention, but it would have been very awkward if only one got in. And so returning to Maine after a long stint in the Pacific Northwest, please welcome and cheer on Andrew Volk.
Thank you. Thank you. I just hit the... Ladies and gentlemen, I stand in front of you, an unabashed geek when it comes to drinking. Ever since we first fermented, we've tinkered and mixed things into our booze. And personally, I love to know the history of what's in my glass. The old-fashioned cocktail is an ideal and simple way to enjoy that kind of history. So when you start paying attention to a bit of what's going on in your glass, be it beer, wine, or cocktails, you start drinking better. It's a pretty great motto, I think. It's a simple idea, but one I encourage everyone to explore. We're talking about quality over quantity here. Taking a moment to think about what liquid is in your glass and why, and where it came from. So a brief word on cocktail geeks like myself before we get too deep into this. There's all sorts of them. And like any other sort of geekery, some go a bit too far, even for me. It's not for everybody. In private, I would happily discuss dilution ratios, vermouths, and the usefulness of the word mixologist. But to keep a broad appeal tonight, we're going to stick to a simple recipe and a little bit of history. The history of cocktails is diverse, colorful, and usually complete bullshit. Despite what you may have heard when it comes to Irish whiskey these days, Catholic versus Protestant-owned companies doesn't mean a thing. And absinthe won't make you hallucinate any more than any other kind of alcohol. When you think about it, the history of alcohol is a pretty ridiculous idea. Everybody's been drinking, and rarely did anyone put down a glass long enough to write about it. Simply put, we don't know where the word cocktail was first used. What we do know is it was first published in a magazine called The Balance and Columbian Repository in May of 1806. And as you can read, it was composed of 4 things: spirits, sugar, water, and bitters. That's it. This was 1806. 56 years later, a book came out, one of the first of its kind, to compile recipes for cocktails by a guy named Jerry Thomas. People who wanted that drink, the one that we just saw from 1806, had to ask for a cocktail made in the old-fashioned style, quote unquote. That's where we get the name old-fashioned. And that separated it from all the other dozens and dozens of drinks coming out in the 1860s and 70s, like the martini and the Manhattan. So back to that definition: bitters, sugar, spirit, and water. The balance of a base spirit and 2 flavors, bitters and sweet, make up most classic cocktails these days. What we're talking about is a template for 200 years of drinking. The old-fashioned is a simple expression of that balance. So let's talk about it a little bit more. Back to that recipe. First, find a glass. Nothing too hard here. Make sure it's clean, or at least kind of clean, and sturdy. You don't want to be spilling your drink or your 5th drink, yo. I happen to have brought a couple of glasses with me this evening for myself and these guys. Second is the sugar and the water. In the 1800s, sugar was a whole lot more difficult to come by, so they took sugar off the back of the bar, put a little in a glass, and added some water. These days, we can make a simple syrup, equal parts of sugar and water. Now, what we're talking about, we don't want to overpower the spirit. We just want to use regular sugar, molasses, maple syrup. That's a little too much. We don't need to do that. The third step is the bitters. There are hundreds of bitters on the markets these days, but they're all rooted in the early days of distilling and alcohol, when we thought that alcohol was really, really good for us. In fact, pharmacists would make these concoctions, proprietary ones, and sell them to make you feel better, to drink in the morning or at night. These days, when we add it to a cocktail for a depth of flavor. Bartenders use bitters like cooks use salt. Just a little bit, it enhances the flavor. Finally, whiskey, the base spirit usually, at least the standard for old fashions since old fashions have been around. Obviously, there's lots of whiskeys to choose from, and really, The old-fashioned if you use it as a template for drinks, you can use pretty much anything. Gin, rum, tequila, whatever. But we'll stick to the basics and just add 2 ounces of rye whiskey. Once you have all of those in the glass, and no, we haven't touched any ice yet, you stir the drink together to mix it. A brief word on shaking and stirring. You shake a drink when there's citrus or cream in it, otherwise you stir it. That's simple, nothing too fancy. And that's it. Once you have all those ingredients in the glasses, and no, we haven't touched any ice yet, that's it. That's the true definition of an old-fashioned. Bitters, sugar, water, and spirit. If you're following along at the bar or in the audience, take a time, sip it. Look at it. And that could be good enough, or not. Sometimes you want ice in your old-fashioned. Sometimes you want to dilute it a little bit. You want to let the night last a little bit longer. One basic rule of cocktail geeks, by the way, the bigger the ice cube, the better the drink. So I actually brought my own ice today, which is kind of geeky, I know. And then you stir it. Additionally, you might want to twist of lemon or orange in your old-fashioned. That means you peel some of the fruit, ideally with a vegetable peeler, which conveniently I forgot at home this evening. And you squeeze the peel over the drink to release some of the oil. You don't get the juice in there, you're just getting the oil. You're adding a little bit of flavor, a little bit more depth. And that's it. I've got one here for myself. I'm going to make a couple more for you guys. One quick note on cherries. You'll notice I haven't talked about cherries at all. Cherries came about during Prohibition when a lot of the alcohol that was being produced was made in basements and cut with turpentine. Cherries just kind of mask the flavor of bad alcohol. If you're going to use one, totally fine. Just get a really good one. A few brief words of advice about old fashions and drinking. There are multitudes of variations of old fashions out there. Many of them are good, and don't let me or anyone else tell you how to drink, or that something is right or wrong. Drink how you want to. Drink when you want to. You're the one that gets to enjoy it, not me or not anyone else. If you do want to become a really geek about these things, use some common sense when you go out. Both of these bartenders are probably really wonderful at their job, but only one of them is going to make you a good cocktail. Know what you're getting into when you go out. Finally, the best piece of advice I can give to anyone going out and drinking comes from a friend of mine and the world's leading cocktail historian, Dave Wondrich. Drink the best thing you can, given what's available. Know how to enjoy cheap beer when that's what you got. Know how to pick out a killer scotch or a great glass of red wine if that's your thing. Just pick something good. Thank you very much for listening to me. In return, I'd like you all to raise your glass and allow me to offer a toast. If you're going to cheat, cheat death. If you're going to lie, lie to save a friend. If you're going to steal, steal a pretty girl's heart. And if you're going to drink, then drink with me. Thank you very much. Kanpai.
Kanpai! Literally, kanpai. Thank you very much, Andrew. That was a wonderful way to kick off the evening, and very, very educational, wouldn't you say? And yes, and I know he has some plans for some ambitious goals in the near future, so I wish him the best of luck.